and welcome back to another episode of Boss Fight Breakdowns. This is the second to last episode that we will be doing as we are finishing out the last few of our boss fights in the main story quest, though there may be a couple of areas that we go around and revisit in the future with some of the additional content. So make sure to check and see if you are subscribed to the channel, and please feel free to do so if you're not, as that subscription is free and easy and I bring content to you on a daily basis. And don't forget to leave a like on the video if you found this episode particularly helpful. So, without further ado, let's have a look at the first boss fight in today's video, which is the fight against Corvus Glaive. Now, Corvus is one of the more annoying and probably one of the most difficult members of the Black Order to fight against, on account of a couple of different things. Now, this is the Reality Stone infused version of Corvus, and the thing that makes this fight difficult on that regard is the fact that he summons in a couple of clones from the Reality Stone that deal a similar amount of damage to him and eat up a lot of the space inside the little arena here. Additionally, his glaive, his staff, deals a high amount of damage, and he attacks in a very rapid succession. So yes, there are other members that we've seen that have high amount of damage output, particularly Cull Obsidian, but Corvus does a lot of high damage dealing attacks in quick succession, and so that is what makes this fight a little bit difficult. Now, the first stage of the fight is relatively straightforward. The second phase is where things start to change pretty drastically, and it will initiate with a phase of 3 of his clones standing in the center and sending energy particle attacks out throughout the arena before Corvus himself slams back down. And Corvus will temporarily disappear and beckon down a couple of glaives falling from the sky that will then trigger any one of a few particle effects and elemental attacks. And of course you do have your 3 revives per fight, and this is probably the fight that you may end up using one on more so than others, but do keep in mind that if you switch off of other members of your team and activate other members of the team, then you can minimize the damage being done to some of your more vulnerable teammates. And that was the strategy that I had there to switch off of Wolverine onto Miles, as Miles was a lot healthier, to get the last of Corvus's health staggered down in order to replenish some health using the extreme abilities of my characters. Now, Corvus will occasionally jump up into the air and then slam back down on the ground. He doesn't deal a large amount of damage with that, but he does have a high amount of stagger that happens when that attack occurs. So it is something to keep in mind. Now, he does eventually lash back out here with his Reality Stone clones, but the key difference here is that instead of segmenting out the arena in different areas, they actually will kind of sweep across in kind of a radial fashion, so you'll want to take that into consideration. Though anytime those clones pop in, they do have a considerable amount less of health in compared to Corvus Glaive himself, so if you do choose to focus on them, you can take them out relatively easily and assure that you don't have as many enemies dealing out copious amounts of damage to you. And the only other attack that you really need to be aware of is there are a couple of times where Corvus will slam down onto the ground, and there will be some spikes that come up from the underground that can deal a lot of damage. And then there was the other attack that you saw just there where he will hurl his glaive outward, and if he does connect with you, he will then teleport immediately next to you and unleash a flurry of attacks there as well. Now, here towards the end, I do get a little bit unfortunate in taking some excess damage that I wasn't planning on and actually losing one of my characters. But again, you can afford to here, as it's not one of the rifts that has a criteria, of not losing a character, and I'm sure that this little segment here didn't help, where his clones appeared on the rim and swept across the arena instead of in the center and sweeping across. But all things considered, the fight has gone relatively smoothly, and as long as you're aware and familiar with the attacks that Corvus throws out, then you should be able to get through the fight with minimal casualties, if any at all. And as you see there, Miles has gone down, but with a couple of final attacks from Wolverine and some of the other members of the team, we have more than what we need to get through this fight. And that brings us to the next fight, and the final fight amongst the members of the Black Order, and this is the fight with Proxima Midnight. Now, the first stage of her fight is similar to what you've seen her do in previous segments where she showed up throughout the story quest, where she lashes out with her scepter a couple of different times, as well as launching out some electrical-based attacks, either directly in front of her in a segmented beam, or she will throw them skyward, and they will come down and home onto the current areas of any of the members on your team. So if you do roll around those attacks, then there's not really anything that you have to be too concerned about, as at this point you really should be familiar with the mechanic of rolling around attacks to reduce the amount of damage received by them or avoid damage entirely. Now, a unique quirk to this fight with Proxima is she is the only member of the Black Order that is not alone, as she does summon in Outriders that will come around and aid her in her fight. And they are predictable and pretty easy to take on, but of course Proxima is the one that deals the heaviest amount of damage that you want to be cautious of. So with just a couple more hits here, we do have Proxima staggered out, and unfortunately we don't have what it takes to get her into her second phase, but the first phase of the fight is relatively straightforward at this point, and she has yet to summon in any of the extra Outriders, though I do believe that that is something that she is capable of doing even before the second phase comes around. At this stage, she's really just providing a lot of attacks that take up large amounts of space, and that is certainly something that you want to be wary of as you come into this fight. Now, with a couple more attacks here, we do have her transitioning into the second phase of the fight, and this is where the dynamic shifts a little bit, as it typically does when you get to the second phase of a boss fight. So she summoned in a couple of more Outriders, and she's leading with some of the attacks that we've seen or we're familiar with from the first stage, but she does gain access to a couple of additional attacks or abilities, given the fact that she has possession of the Space Stone. Now, the first one that she's been exhibiting here is she will teleport around the arena, similar in fashion to what we saw Supergiant do, but with less frequency. And that tends to make things a little bit easier, but still annoying to deal with on their own. Now, the second attack that she gains access to that you want to be very cautious of is that one you just saw her unleash, where she will shoot a blue energy beam across the stage, and if that connects with you, it will draw you in for a nigh inescapable attack, and that's just not something that is fun for anyone involved. But at this stage, you've really seen any of the things that you do need to keep in mind. The only other key difference to this stage of the fight is she will beckon in additional Outriders to her cause to aid in taking you on, but she's a lot more vulnerable in this stage as well. So as you saw, I unleashed a full set of extreme attacks with all of my characters on the team, and that dealt a significant amount of her health in damage, and we should be able to just about finish this fight out. Now, one ability that I do really like about this team that I currently have put together is actually with Dr. Doom, and I'm going to showcase that here right at the end as soon as we get Proxima kind of staggered out or towards the end of that cycle, and that is summoning in a Doombot and then using his energy beam attack as it chews through the stagger bar and then just melts through the remainder of her health. So that is a very nice tool to have in our arsenal. But with all that being said, this is the end of today's episode, so I do hope that you've enjoyed and that this has been a beneficial series for you. We will be back with the final installment of Boss Fight Breakdowns for the main series on Wednesday. So thanks again for watching, and we hope to see you then. Take care, and have a great rest of your day.